This will see your company become a world-class investment case. It will thrive through that energy transition, and it will maintain a strong societal license to operate. Now, just before we go to the Q&A, I would like to acknowledge another very important matter, and that's the ongoing legal case related to OPL 245 in Nigeria. Shell's legal director, Donnie Ching, presented an update on this case and another recent development relating to the divestment in 2011 of a separate block, also in Nigeria, OML 42. And he did that during the responsible investor event that we had in April of this year. The materials and the presentation he made are available on our investor website, which is open to all of you as well. And as these are live cases, live legal cases, we will not be able to take any questions on them today. However, I would like to reiterate that based on the information available to us, including the Milan Public Prosecutor's file, we do not believe there is a basis to convict Shell of any of our former four employees in relation to OPL 245, and we will vigorously defend our case. For OML 42, we suspect a crime may have been committed against Shell, and we have filed a criminal complaint with the Dutch authorities. And with that, let me hand you back to Chad for the Q&A.
Thank you, Ben. We now come to the part of the meeting where you'll have the opportunity to ask questions and make comments. As you saw in the notice of meeting, we have 19 resolutions before our meeting today. One of those resolutions was submitted by a shareholder group. The others are more routine matters for a PLC of our nature. We will take all the major questions around energy transition, strategy, the accounts under resolution number 1. But if you have specific questions about one of the other 18 resolutions, including resolution 19 from the shareholders, please reserve those to that point in time. It's important that as you ask your question today, you identify your name. Please address all your questions to me. If I feel I need to ask one of my fellow directors to help, I will certainly call on them, and they'll be very active in the meeting, but I think it can be more orderly if you address your questions to me. You should have a white poll card that's available to you, and there's polling boxes as you exit that you put those in. We've appointed the company's registrar, Equity, and they will be the formal scrutineers of today's meeting. I would like you to keep your questions and comments to the subject of today's meeting. It's very important that as many people as possible have a chance to ask their questions. So please be brief and keep the subject to the point. If possible, we will group a few questions together all around one subject so we can more efficiently answer them, or certainly reference our previous answers as we go forward. It's my objective to make sure we have an orderly meeting and everyone gets a fair hearing. A personal comment about this meeting. I think it is critically important that once a year, every shareholder of a public company has the opportunity to come here, even if you only own one share, and ask any pertinent question you want to the board of directors of this company. It's a critical part of the process working, but it's not perfect. But if we work together in this meeting, I think we can continue to improve and be sure that every shareholder is heard and has a response to their questions. Let's now go to resolution number 1, which is the report of accounts. The unqualified auditor's report are on pages 118 through 134 of your report. And we'll now start with podium number 1. Identify yourself and your question, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Matt Crossman. I'm the Stewardship Director for Rathbone Investment Management. I'm here today to make a statement on behalf of, I think, 27 corporate investors in Shell, collectively representing $7.9 trillion in assets under management. I'll read them out very, very briefly. NN Investment Partners, HSBC, BMO, AXA Investment Management, Rathbone Greenbank, BNP, CSCLA, Central Finance Board of the Methodist Church, Aegon, Merseyside Pension Fund, USS, AP4, Newton, Aviva, ELO, UBS Asset Management, Nataxis, P+, LGIM, Aberdeen Standard, PKA, SEB, Ruffer, CalPERS, MN, Caister Depot, and last but not least, the Pensions Trust. Additionally, we're making this statement as supporters of the Climate Action 100+ initiative, which is a 5-year partnership looking to work with companies to enhance corporate governance on climate change, curb emissions, and strengthen climate-related financial disclosures. And that organisation has 260 investors supporting it with $28 trillion under management, equivalent to nearly 1/3 of all assets under management in the world. So, Mr. Chairman, bearing that in mind, as long-term institutional investors who must manage retirement savings and investments for millions of people, we believe climate change to be one of the largest systemic risks that we face. Any gaps, weaknesses, or delays in climate change policies and responses by companies will increase these risks to our investments. The Climate Action 100+ is a new 5-year investor-led initiative to partner with companies to conclusively tackle these risks and take up the opportunities presented by climate change. And you'll be aware that Royal Dutch Shell has been included in the target list for this initiative. Mr. Chairman, at the 2015 AGM, 98% of shareholders backed calls for enhanced reporting from our company on the risks that climate change poses to the business. It was the opinion of many shareholders that the success of this resolution provided a sufficient framework for the company to provide robust evidence of its efforts to address the effects of climate change and how that could have a value on the company. We note that the subsequent efforts and resolutions of climate change have failed to gain significant support. Mr. Chairman, at last year's AGM, on behalf of the IIGCC, we outlined broad and robust support for target setting on climate matters from investors. We asked the company to commit to setting public group-wide targets on its direct emissions and also to clarify how it takes into account the emissions from the use of its products. Having posed this challenge, we were greatly encouraged by the announcement made by the company in November 2017 as regards the net carbon footprint. Mr. Chairman, this move is genuinely innovative and sector-leading. It's clear that companies like Shell must take their responsibility for the impacts of their products and we acknowledge the truly pioneering step taken by management. We congratulate the board and the management team for taking this step, but not merely because targets are useful tools, but more importantly because it sets out the broad parameters for a long-term sustainable business model through which the company can survive the energy transition. The leadership demonstrated is to be congratulated. I have a number of comments which I'll make about the specifics of that, but I'll save that to the resolution discussion for the sake of the long queue behind me. So I think it's widely understood that all stakeholders value long-term targets, and we do not consider the company's caution in this area to be quite necessary. So our question to you today, Mr. Chairman, and the rest of the board, would be that while we applaud the stated net carbon footprint ambition, and we would challenge all other oil and gas companies to follow suit indeed, we want to see this translated into firm, medium and short-term targets aligned with the Paris Agreement, driving sustainable capital allocations to be made in the vital 2020 to 2030 period. So my question is, will the board be moving to make this ambition much more concrete in the shorter term, and will you be aligning it to executive pay packages? Thank you.
Matt, thank you very much for your very complete report. And as I'd like to signal that the 2015 resolution, of course, the board fully supported. And we have been working very eagerly to implement that. And I think you'll find we're living up to that, in fact, exceeding it in a number of places. I think we've been very clear about our movement forward. I think we've taken a major step under management's leadership last November. It has struck us how many people in the world have think this is really the right way to deal with it. We realize it will take some time for people to digest this and understand what it means to them. But I think we're in the right direction, and I find very little to disagree with your comments on. But Ben, would you like to add?
Yeah, thank you very much for your acknowledgement, Mr. Grossman. I think, as Chairman has said, we are indeed leading in this field. I don't think there is any company that has ambitions that are as wide-ranging and also as complete and comprehensive as what we have done with basically not only the products that we sell, but bear in mind also that we sell 3 times as many products as we actually produce. So therefore, the ambition level is much more much higher. I think the ambitions that we've set to reduce the carbon footprint of our energy products by 50% by 2015 is a very, very significant effort. I'm sure that later on there will be more questions. I'll be happy to explain what that could entail in terms of the actions we have to take. And by 2035, we said we need to get to 20% as a waypoint. So we don't take our ambitions lightly. If we say these things, if the reputation of the company is irrevocably linked to the ambitions that we set and the fulfillment of these ambitions, you can be assured that we will take this very seriously. The problem with targets, and there's a little bit of a semantic issue maybe, why is an ambition not a target? Well, the problem with a target, particularly if you adopt it in a resolution, means that, if we, in the course of the coming 30, 40 years, find that we have to adjust the target, because the things that are working out are different than what we have anticipated back in 2018, we will have to again come back and ask for 75% approval from all our shareholders to adjust the target. And we think that is onerous and cumbersome because nobody can foresee exactly how the energy transition is playing out over this time frame. But it doesn't mean that we are less committed to making sure that we do the right thing. I'm sure we will grapple with the issue of how it gets tied to executive pay. Let me not comment on the mechanics and the details of that. I think it would be somewhat inappropriate. But also bear in mind, it's not trivial to set a target that will be fulfilled in 2035 or 2050. To link that, how I'm going to be remunerated, has some timing issues to it. We will no doubt struggle with that, and we will no doubt talk in detail with our shareholders on how we could practically sort of come forward in that area. But thank you very much for your support.
Number 2.
Goedemorgen, dames en heren.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Robert Vreke of We Connect You, Public Affairs and Investor Relations. Mr. Van Beurden is well on his way. And what I think is important is to practice what you preach and to walk the talk. And I do this, for instance, with Maurits Groen and André Kuipers, the astronaut. And I have brought something along to show you what the impact is of Shell's policy. The crown jewel of sustainability in the Netherlands is the Wakka Wakka. The Wakka Wakka is your own personal solar screen. It's your own solar panel, says the speaker. And the wonderful thing about this Wakka Wakka, as you can see, is that it's yellow. So for Mr. Van Beurden, it's very simple to work with myself, Maurits Groen and André Kuipers, and to put a Shell logo here on these black points, because there are more than 1 billion people in the world that don't have electricity and that don't have access to energy. And it only costs 5 billion euros to supply all these people with energy and light with these Wakka Wakka devices. Because at this point in time, they have very polluting kerosene lamps, and 300,000 children become burnt. And there are very sustainable businesses in the Netherlands, ING, Heineken, and Philips. And with those companies in the Netherlands, we can realize within 5 years' time that all these people have sustainable access to light. And Shell can blaze the trail and can set an example. The former CEO of Shell, your predecessor, Jeroen van der Veer, he was at ING. And within 10 years, he made sure that ING became the most sustainable bank in the world. And to thank him for that, I gave him a Wakka Wakka. And a picture was taken by no one less than Mr. Jan-Peter Balkenende, the former Prime Minister. And he's also very excited about the Wakka Wakka. And then there's yet another challenge. Someone asked me to come up with a proposal to provide 1,000 buildings with solar panels. And I would love to do that with Shell. And also to provide gas stations of Shell and all buildings of Shell with solar panels. So we can kill two birds with one stone. Furthermore, I attended the Aegon meeting, and Rob Routs, the chairman of the supervisory board of Aegon, supports Resolution 19. Perhaps you can tell me how the former CFO can support this resolution. And then there's one more thing. Marianne van Loon attended a meeting in Amsterdam in Pakhuis de Zwijver, and she did a wonderful job. So I was thinking, you know, I left the building, I went outside, and I thought, well, there she is. She has a hydrogen car. But no, surprise, surprise, she was there. She had a Mercedes 500S, the most polluting Mercedes. I think it would be an excellent idea, if you decide to continue to drive Mercedes, is that you, as quickly as possible, move to hybrid cars and then electric cars. Because, I mean, it's unacceptable that you come up with this wonderful presentation, that you're so sustainable as Shell, and that you then drive around with a 500S Mercedes. That's not setting the example. So my questions are, one, how are we going to introduce the Waka Waka along with Shell and other corporations in the world? And how are we going to provide 1,000 rooftops with solar panels with other Dutch companies? What about Resolution 19 to follow this? How come Rob Routs supports that of Aegon and also DSM? And then finally, here I see all these dirty Mercedeses. Why don't you drive to this meeting with hydrogen cars? I mean, we can change that very quickly within a year. Those are my questions.
And if Ben would like to add something, first we applaud you for your whacker whacker idea. We also have ours. It's a bag of rocks. You might have seen it in the other thing. But I think we'll be glad to discuss with you ideas around solar. But that's not the purpose of this meeting. But our solar team would be glad to talk with you. I don't want to speak about it. Any one person might vote on a resolution. I just don't think it's our place to speak for them. Ben, would you like to add anything?
Yes, thanks very much, Chad, and thank Mr. Vreke for your comments. Access to energy is a key point. We work on access to energy in two different ways. First of all, through our foundation, the Shell Foundation, who actually is also in the business of providing personal lighting solutions, extremely small scale solar and other biofuel solutions to communities who have very limited access to energy. But also in the main business, in Shell itself, we have, under the New Energies business, actually an access to energies business. So this is a business that serves those of us who have very limited access to energy, but not so much as a charity, but as a way to make money. Because ultimately, unfortunately, not only are these statistics that you mentioned true, but also people who actually have poor access to energy spend a disproportionate amount of their income on energy provision in the form of kerosene, lighting, etc. We want to turn that also into something that we can help at scale, and you can only do things at scale if it actually makes business interest. We do indeed have a program to green our retail network, and as said, we're happy to talk about some of the ideas that you may have. I will not comment on Rob Routs. That is for him to exactly comment on. But let me talk about cars. So I also have a Mercedes, company Mercedes. It is a hybrid, and I also have a hybrid car at home. Which, by the way, I fill up with a new motion PowerPoint with Shell Power behind it. So personally, I have embraced the energy transition in my personal mobility solutions already. Thank you very much.
Number one.
Great, thank you. Andy Jones from Hermes Investment Management. Mr. Chairman, members of the board and fellow shareholders, I'm here on behalf of Hermes Investment Management and our asset owner and manager clients of Hermes Equity Ownership Services, who together have invested over £1 billion in Shell. We are also supporters of the Climate Action 100. I would first like to thank the Chair for our continued open and constructive dialogue over the last year with him and also with senior management. We welcome the company's long-term ambition, covering its energy products and in line with the societal ambition of the Paris Agreement. It provides the means by which Shell can truly fulfill its purpose to power progress together with more and cleaner energy solutions. However, the use of the term ambition rather than target has raised doubts among the company's commitment to this goal. And to allay these concerns and to help secure a successful implementation, we too request that Shell commits to publish its short to medium-term targets, led and set by management and the board, for its decarbonisation strategy as soon as possible and at least prior to the next AGM. We believe these can still allow for flexibility. We also request that the company confirms that its 2050 ambition is synonymous with a long-term science-based target. Thank you.
Andy, thank you very much for your comments, and we do appreciate the advice you've given us throughout the year. Let me assure you, we're taking into account how we continue to robust everything we're doing in this program. I'm sure we'll learn things every year. I can't commit now to exactly what we'll include and not include. We really want to keep the dialogue going and find ways to improve. But I think the step this company has taken in the last 12 months is a larger step than I've seen any company in the world take, and we're very proud of it. Thank you. Number two.
Geachte meneer Van Beurden.
Mr. Van Beurden and dear shareholders, my name is Ate Kuipers. I live in Oldenhoven with my wife in the province of Groningen. Our family consists of 5 children who are all married and highly educated, 10 grandchildren. In Groningen, we have a dairy farm with 150 cows and other animals. And our farm is located in the earthquake area and has been seriously damaged. And on behalf of all the farmers in Groningen, I would like to speak to you, Mr. Van Beurden. I'm an entrepreneur, and I would like to tell you what the impact is of your decisions and how it has affected our security in Groningen and how you've given precedent to your economic interests. And I would like you to reflect on my story and link it to your own private life and your company. Shall you have a family with children, perhaps even grandchildren? Do you have a safe house? Do they live in safe houses? In short, do your relatives live and work in safe environments, future-proof environment? We had a good farm, a safe farm. We were producing in a way that, consumers would like to identify with our way of farming. We embrace environmental issues. Since 2012 and the severe earthquakes from 2013 to now, our buildings have been damaged and weakened, completely weakened by the earthquakes. And the cows are full of stress in the meadows. We have leaks, and we have walls that are crumbling in the stables, in the residential area. For 2 centuries, our farm has been unaffected, but since 2013, it's devastating, and all due to your gas exploration activities of Shell and NAM, and the situation has become increasingly unsafe. Everything is moving on our farm, except for the NAM when it comes to compensation. The NAM, behind my back, when taking stock of damages, reported to my municipality to say that our farm was unsafe and needed to be closed. I had to invest from my own money in order to make sure that my farm would not be closed by the municipality. Just imagine, Mr. Van Beurden, that your house, your office, all of a sudden would start to fall apart. Your family, your staff would have to leave your house, your manufacturing areas, your offices, because they're afraid. They have to find a safe place outside the farm. That stress, that unrest is all caused by your company. My story is the story of many, many fellow farmers, many colleagues, many families. They feel unsafe. Just think of what that means to these entrepreneurs, Mr. Van Beurden, if your business is put at risk by what your company does, Shell and NAM. The farmers have about 80% of the surface in Groningen. There are usually leakages in their farms. Their buildings have been weakened. There's no drainage system anymore. It doesn't work anymore. In very many cases, the farmers are devastated, don't know what to do. Damages are immense. Is this the Groningen landscape that you want to pass on to our children, our grandchildren, Mr. van Beurden, during the hearings in Parliament in The Hague on the 1st of February this year. Ms. van Loon was also there, and the director of NAM, Mr. Schotman, were also present. And your fellow shareholder of the NAM, ExxonMobil, was also present there. And I attended that meeting with many hardworking farmers. We drove there with our tractors and were facing doom and gloom. And it impressed all the farmers in the public tribune that Ms. van Loon, on behalf of Shell at the meeting, said, in answer to questions of members of Parliament, that Shell will never avoid its responsibility and will not leave the farmers alone, that Shell would always make sure that NAM can compensate farmers in Groningen. But ExxonMobil was not as generous. There was a clear difference between the two. Then you would think, well, fantastic that Ms. van Loon was so clear on behalf of Shell in her statements. But a written statement, there was no such written statement. I thought then, why don't you just write it down and sign it with the members of Shell management? That never happened. Ms. van Loon and Mr. van Beurden. Didn't Ms. van Loon have a full mandate? Ms. van Loon was speaking as president of Shell Netherlands. She said the following about the NAM, that high dividends are being paid to Shell on an annual basis, and that Shell is pulling back from the concession, the 403 statement. And I'm quoting Ms. van Loon. We continue to say that NAM, as a company, is financially robust and will continue to be financially robust, and we stand behind them. Should that not be the case, I will give you the guarantee that there will be payments, and we will do this on behalf of Shell the Netherlands, which is a large company. And these guarantees are guarantees that we are able to give. So there will be compensation. These billions will be paid, and that's going to be done through NAM. I hope so. I think so. I trust so. And should that not be the case, then here I would like to offer you my last guarantee that those bills will be paid for, that we as Shell stand behind it. Dear Mr. van Beurden, I have this piece of paper with me here. It's just one sheet of paper. I've got it here. And with the text that I just read out to you. Now, if you would just sign this statement of the President of Shell Netherlands, then farmers, citizens would be so much more reassured that Shell Netherlands is actually going to pay for the damages, make Groningen and the Netherlands proud of our Royal Shell again. And let me add to you that I, every week, drive from Groningen to Leipzig, Dresden in Germany, where we also have large farms, dairy farms, and I tank at Shell in the Netherlands and Germany. And people are surprised and ask me, well, Mr. Kuipers, you should be the one to boycott Shell. Well, I'm not going to do that. I want to make sure that Shell is capable of becoming a green company, a company in which all the injured parties in Groningen, all the Dutch people can be proud of, because you bear the name Royal. So please show us over the next few months, also by signing this piece of paper now, I hope, that the royal predicate is something you deserve. Thank you for your attention.
Complete comments. Ben, would you add?
Thank you very much, Mr. Kuipers. Is it okay if I respond in English? Or would you
It's fully okay.
Okay.
I understand you.
Well, let me be crystal clear then. So first of all, it pains me to hear your story, and be in no doubt, everybody in Shell is in pains to hear stories like this. These are difficult stories for us to listen to, difficult stories to also be part of. we discussed the subject of Groningen, the tremors in Groningen, the NAM, very regularly in our executive committee, and as a matter of fact, quite regularly in our board as well. And every time I have an update with chairman, which is once a week, roughly, topics like this do come up. So be in no doubt, we are very much aware of what is happening. We are engaged with what is happening. And there is, let me reassure you, happening more behind the scenes than it perhaps is in evidence in the sort of the daily news. The assertion that often is being made is that we would somehow put profits ahead of the safety of Groningen is simply not true. What is the problem here is that there are two national priorities that need to be served. The national priority of supplying energy, so security of supply of a source of gas that is relatively unique. We cannot replace Groningen gas with any other gas because of its low calorific value. So if there is no Groningen, a lot of things would go wrong in this country immediately. And of course, the safety of the population in Groningen. These are considerations that no private company can make. We do not want to make these considerations. We do not want to have a dilemma that we have to weigh between two national interests. And therefore we think this dilemma needs to be weighed by the government. That's the only entity who can make a determination of what to happen. And that is very much also the mode in which we have been operating with the government. Government, tell us what to do, and we will do it. But we will, come what may, as NAM, be responsible for the damage that ensues from that operation. We've been very clear in that respect as well. Now, I understand that there has been some consternation and confusion when the guarantees that Shell Nederland offered to NAM were revoked. The reason why that was the case was because they had nothing to do with the earthquakes. NAM does not publish, or did not publish rather, an annual account. So therefore suppliers to NAM, people who deliver services or equipment, could not see what the financial standing of the company was. And because of that, Shell Netherlands actually issued the guarantee that you did. But when, in the context of further transparency, we actually started publishing the annual accounts of NAM, the need for that guarantee disappeared. That then later on got interpreted as if Shell Nederland would walk away from its guarantees. I think that issue got somewhat hijacked, as sometimes tends to happen in emotional cases like this. But again, we can reassure you that first of all, NAM is in a perfect financial health condition, can pay all the damage that will ensue from it. And if it doesn't, Shell Nederland indeed will back that up with guarantees. Mrs. Van Loon, when she spoke at the time, had a full mandate from me to make that statement. As a matter of fact, a full mandate also from the entire executive committee and from our chairman. And we will stand by that guarantee. That guarantee is going to be a component of a wide-ranging agreement that we have been negotiating with the government for almost a year now, which is in its final stages. These have been very constructive discussions with Minister Wiepens and his department and the two shareholders, ExxonMobil and Shell. And we are in the stage that we can finish that soon. And then, because it is a governmental matter, it will be led to the cabinet to disclose and debate all of this in Parliament, which I'm sure will be necessary. But again, let there be no mistake that indeed NAM is healthy. NAM takes responsibility for all the damage that comes from earthquakes, whether or not we are operating at the instruction of the minister at levels that whatever the levels may be. And if there is any shortfall, indeed, Shell Nederland will provide a guarantee. All of that will be properly documented in a legally binding document between the shareholders and the government. So therefore, while I understand your inclination to bring a document here for me to sign, that would have no standing in relation to the document that we are hopefully about to sign with the government on this. Now, another statement that we have heard from time to time is that we would still take dividends out of NAM. We don't, Mr. Kuipers. We leave the dividends in NAM for the time being, just to make sure that NAM is solvent, that it has all the provisions and all the financial capability, again, to deal with the unfortunate damage that has been sustained. But again, make no mistake, the issue of Groningen is a very defining issue for NAM, as you can imagine. Certainly now that NAM will see Groningen go down to 0 by 2030, but also for its shareholders. We very much realize that this is an issue on which we will be judged in the Netherlands, and in the fullness of time, we want to be judged in a favorable way. Thank you very much.
Microphone number 1.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Adam Matthews, and I'm a representative of the Church Commissioners for England and the Church of England Pensions Board. We're also part of the Climate Action 100 initiative and very much support the statement that Matt Crossman made earlier when the questions began. As you know, an open letter was sent to you from the heads of the Church Commissioners, the Pensions Board and the Chair of the Environment Agency Pension Fund in England. In that letter, we acknowledge the very important leadership that Shell have shown with the announcement in November last year that you've set a climate ambition that covers Scope 1 to 3 emissions. The very fact you acknowledge responsibility for all your emissions, and in particular Scope 3, is enormously important. We also acknowledge the hugely significant statement that you should be viewed as a primary energy producer. We believe you're right in this ambition. With these two developments, Shell have made an intervention that challenges everybody in this room and outside of this room, and your involvement with oil and gas companies, to look very differently at the role of oil and gas companies in the transition to a low-carbon economy. We've sought to respond to this with the publication of the Transition Pathway Initiative paper, Carbon Performance Assessment in Oil and Gas. And TPI's academic team at the London School of Economics is due to meet with Shell staff shortly to look at the respective methodologies. The position we take in supporting the Follow This resolution later is not one that's targeted at Shell, nor is it intended to imply that we see you as a laggard in any way, quite the reverse. Rather, it's based in our belief that we need targets across the whole oil and gas sector, not just at Shell. We expect all oil and gas companies to come forward with similar targets that include Scope 3 emissions. My question is therefore to ask the board, whatever the result of the vote today, if you'll reconsider your position on targets. It's clear from the statements made by other investors today, in the media, before the AGM, and through the Climate Action 100 initiative, that there's a strong shareholder support for such further action by Shell. Your challenge is you're a leader, you've stepped out as such. We're encouraging you to take the next step, and I think shareholders have clearly indicated they're really willing to work with you on this, and we're keen to find a way that perhaps there's a shareholder resolution or an announcement that you could support on targets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your transition pathway paper. You and I have discussed it personally. We reviewed it on multiple forums. I think it's the kind of paper we need. It's the kind of document we need to get into the subject. We're in the process of studying it now. We want to have dialogue with shareholders over this next year. This is not the time or place to say exactly what that dialogue will come out, but I think as people understand net carbon footprint and we take input from that, I believe we'll move closer and closer to a solution. We agree totally it's got to be everybody working on this together. It can't be just Shell. And so we welcome your encouragement of a lot of our industry peers to follow the lead. Thank you very much. Number 2.
Goedemorgen, Sandra Wekkerman.
Good morning, Sandra Weckerman. I'm also from Groningen, and I'm not happy with the answer that you gave Mr. Kuiper, so I'd also like to ask a question. It is unbelievably painful to see the catastrophe caused by the state, Shell, NAM, and Exxon in my beloved Groningen. More than 140,000 people have suffered damages to their homes because of earthquakes caused by human action, gas exploration. And one person from Groningen said, if your house is damaged, your skin is damaged. 10,000 people in Groningen have become ill because of the earthquakes, the damages, and the very slow pace at which Shell, NAM, and Exxon have been taking their responsibility. People are so unbelievably tired, so unbelievably fed up with their struggle. They want to get their dreams back. 2 weeks ago, I met Riza. Riza is well educated. She's in her 20s. She had a wonderful job and she had her first home. And when she started to make some changes to her house, during that process, she couldn't live in that house. It was unlivable. So she had to live in a shed behind her house. And while she was there, she said, at the beginning, I'd lost my basis, but I still had hope. But now I've lost my hope as well, because I received a letter that the construction work is being stopped and she has to stay in the shed in her garden for a longer period of time. And her 3-year-old nephew said to his mother, during an earthquake, the house is doing boom, boom. And I would like to hear from you, not what your promises are or what your wonderful words are for this 3-year-old nephew, but which actions you intend to take for this 3-year-old nephew. Because shareholders, fellow shareholders, we cannot accept that 3-year-olds say to their mothers, the house is doing boom, boom. And you've just been asked questions and wonderful promises. You cannot live safely in wonderful promises. We don't need beautiful words. We need actions. Actions so that we can give Groningen a future again. I would like to ask you, when will you give us legally binding security? You didn't want to sign Mr. Kuiper's contract, but can you point out when, on which date we will have that security? And can you point out that if it were up to you, the full contract and all previous contracts and all agreements that you've made with the state will become public information? You once said that honesty, integrity, and respect for people, that's what you referred to in your speech as well. You said that those are the core values. Well, then please don't go for the business interests again, but go for Groningen. Disclose the arrangements you made and make sure that the people in Groningen have legally binding security as soon as possible. Ben?
Again, well, thanks for sharing this. And I hope also for those shareholders who are not familiar with the situation in the Netherlands, you get a sense of how difficult and how important a good resolution of this issue is. I express my regret for what has happened in Groningen and what has happened to those who are close to you. And again, we want to do everything to make sure that this is being made right. Now, maybe I say a few things, not so much in defense, but perhaps for a little bit of context. Of course, NAM at the time was set up as a company that was there to explore and produce natural gas. It, of course, never had the capability of having to deal with hundreds of thousands of claims, which it has tried. And I believe in a vast percentage has been successful to do so, which doesn't mean that the sense of insecurity has disappeared. It doesn't mean that there haven't been cases where things have not gone well. But it has had the intention to make sure that this is being handled appropriately. Over time, we've also learned, by the way, from the feedback that NAM got from Groningen, from the way the cases played out, that it was better that NAM was not involved in assessing and therefore have an independent entity that would do so. So that is part of the agreement with the government as well. NAM is at a distance from the management of claims. It will be done by a professional claims organization. What NAM will do is pay the bill. And again, there is, for the avoidance of doubt, there is going to be a very clear understanding. There always has been a very clear understanding. As a matter of fact, there is a legal obligation for NAM to pay all the damage that comes forth out of earthquakes. And NAM has no intention to walk away from that. And as Shell, we have no intention to walk away from NAM's obligations as well. And that's what we will be doing. When that will come out, I cannot tell you in sort of a precise date. In the end, this is a discussion that we are having with the government of this country. The government of this country will have to have the debate in Parliament to make sure that the agreement with us is being ratified. And I have no way of predicting exactly how that is going to play out. There will be all sorts of factors affecting that as well. What I do know is that we are very close in this, that there is, in principle, a meeting of minds, something that I'm very confident and proud to defend when it comes out. How it exactly comes out, again, is a matter of shall we say, political discourse. So I cannot help you in that respect because it's also outside my control. But I hope by having spent quite a bit of time on the two questions to explain how we stand in this matter, the intentions are made clear. And I hope that there will still be enough trust in the company here in the Netherlands and in Groningen that our word goes a long way ahead of pen and paper. Thank you.
Just let me add that the board of directors is fully supportive of everything Ben said, and I think you should take some very much strong reassurance of that too. Thank you. Number one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Frank Altenaar, and I represent the VBDO, the Association for Investors in Sustainable Development. I will ask 3 questions, each of them preceded by a short introduction. First of all, we wish to compliment you on several key elements of your Sustainable Development Strategy. VBDO has taken note of the relevant and ambitious steps Shell is taking with regard to climate change. Shell has formulated an ambition for 2050 to reduce its net CO2 footprint of its energy products sold with 50%. In addition, the company has published a new Sky scenario, which was specifically designed to reach the Paris Agreement goal of keeping the global average temperature rise to well below 2 degrees. And importantly, it is to be achieved in a technically possible manner. We compliment you also with the Energy Transition Report. Now to the questions. The first question is about natural capital, and specifically on energy consumption. It appears to us that the Sky scenario and the Energy Transition Report both assume a substantially higher energy consumption than most other scenarios. On what basis does Shell conclude that the demand for energy will grow to this extent? And how does Shell see its role in lowering the per capita energy consumption? This is my first question. The second question is on living wage, totally different subjects than you've heard today. The company provides its employees competitive terms and conditions of unemployment. You can look at the general business principles for that. And expects its customers to meet or exceed minimum wages, what we can read in the supplier principles. However, this does not guarantee that salaries are sufficiently high to cover food, housing and other basic needs for employees and their relatives. Is Shell willing to commit to include living wages in its general business principles as well as in its supplier principles? The third question is on sustainable development goals. VBDO congratulates the company with, I believe they have contributed that, the report of the IPIECA, if I have it right, mapping the oil and gas industry to the Sustainable Development Goals, an atlas. It's being referred to in the sustainability report. The company has sharpened its focus on the SDGs and now prioritizes 6 goals. For each goal, the contribution is specified separately, like what we can see in the sustainability report on pages 36 and 38. However, at this point in time, there are no measurable time-bound targets on the contribution to these ambitious societal goals, even though they need to be realized in 2030. Question: when will Shell set smart targets on the actions by which it contributes to the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you for your very clear questions. I'll take 1 and 3. Ben, if you could take number 2. First, thank you for taking such close note of the Sky scenario. We think it's a good piece of work, but it is one scenario. We're not saying that is the only way it can come out or necessarily the best way for it to come out. So please don't read that as we are lobbying for that scenario. It's just giving all the information we had. We thought it's one that needed to be out there. And we look forward to dialogue with that versus other scenarios as we go forward. Thank you also for noting the Sustainable Development Goals. If you will note, Ben's presentation, we talked about access for energy at length. We showed it in some of the videos at the first. It's number 7. It's one of the critical Sustainable Development Goals. What you're seeing is our willingness to report on these goals and get it out there. I think what's very important is we take real action and report on the action. As we get farther down the road, if we can see targets or ambitions that will be helpful, we'll certainly consider that. But what we're focused on now is action that can make a difference. Ben?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Altema. We do indeed make use of contractors and also a contingent workforce, so people who work in the organization but are not permanent Shell employees. They are there for a certain period of time. And as far as the contingent workforce is concerned, we treat them in the same way as we would treat Shell employees in terms of the rights that they have, the way they can use internal facilities and everything else. I do believe that we as a company pay adequately. We basically benchmark our salaries to be at the 75th percentile in the different economies in which we operate, simply because we want to be seen as a competitive employer. And in that respect, I do think with annual reviews, we meet that, which from time to time also means that we subject ourselves to pay moderation if we see that we're getting a little bit ahead of society. As far as contractors is concerned, we have a very significant number of contractors, of course, which we basically employ from time to time. For instance, when we do large maintenance activities in our refineries and our platforms or build projects from time to time, we, of course, need many more staff to work on our sites than we could sort of continuously employ. But also there, we make sure that they are employed under terms and conditions that meet our principles. You mentioned yourself the supplier principles, which means that we expect from our contractors that they have the same rules and regulations when it comes to safety, environment, sustainable development, etc., etc. We cannot and we do not set the pay of these people. We cannot be seen doing that. Although, of course, if there would be violations of human rights principles or if we believe that people are being inadequately treated, for instance, with very long travel distances or being housed in dormitories that are not to the standards that we want to have our own people housed, we do intervene. But we do not set the pay policies for people who work for contractors that we subsequently employ, which doesn't mean, by the way, that we do not have active engagements with people. We do believe that people need to be given overall a value proposition that is consistent with the society in which they operate. So we do not have living wages as a principle in our supplier principles, but we have many other things that will make sure that our contractors employ their people on equitable terms.
Okay, thank you. Number two.
Good morning. My name is Femke Slegers, and I will speak on behalf of Fossil-Free Education. What do you think? Does Shell like kids? I know a lot of these proxies here today will say you don't, that Shell doesn't like kids. But I put a lot of study in what Shell does for kids, and I know you do like kids. Generation Discover, Bright Ideas Hub, Make the Future, Eco Marathon, Petro-Pete. Shell does a lot for schools. Shell does a great deal for children. I would say it's also almost magic you pull on youngsters. Making Shell's part in fueling climate change disappear like poof. In Groningen, Shell teaches at elementary schools that gas extraction might cause a little tremor. At high schools, Shell teaches teenagers that the dangerous fossil fuel methane, also known as natural gas, is in fact the solution to climate change. Yet, the most stunning vanishing act you pulled at Festival Generation Discover. At the festival, you invite kids to make a jigsaw puzzle of the energy mix in 2050. I was baffled by the outcome. According to Shell's puzzle, the world in 2050 still runs on 70% coal, oil, and gas. Not 17%, 70. That's 70% more than the world agreed upon in Paris. So, at Generation Discover, in front of 1 million kids, you tried to make the Paris Agreement disappear. Poof. I asked your employee at Generation Discover why Shell would tell kids things that are so contrary to Paris. And this was his answer. He said, "We want to give children a realistic version of the future." So, while their parents are investing in solar panels, Shell teaches their kids, "Oh, don't mind Paris. It's not realistic. Paris is in the realm of fantasy." Is that a blush on your face? Are you ashamed? You should be. This is not fully aligning your business to Paris. This is pumping up as much as you can pump up. This is fooling kids and society at a decisive moment in our history, making us believe there's no alternative and we need oil and gas for decades and decades to come. So, in your ideal future, who will be pumping the oil and gas? Who will be buying the fossil fuels? Who will be the politicians that favor Shell? Exactly. That's why Shell likes kids. Now, I have one question for you. At Generation Discover, Shell tells kids that Paris isn't realistic. And yet, here, today, you say you are strongly supportive of Paris? Those stories don't add up. So I ask you now, which one is true?
Ben, would you respond, please?
Thank you, Mrs. Slaters. First of all, I do like children. I have 4 of them. And I would like also to look after their future, as we all do. Indeed, we do like to encourage scientific, technical, engineering and mathematics subjects amongst children. We believe it is needed in society going forward, and we will be beneficiary of it if indeed people do choose these subjects to make their career and hopefully become also potential candidates to work for a company like us. I think we don't directly educate children, of course, but we do engage with them where we can to stimulate that interest. And indeed, you're right, we would like to bring realism to the discussion as well. We do support Paris. As a matter of fact, we believe that Paris is doable. We also believe it's a tremendous challenge to meet Paris. At the moment, we are not, as a society, we are not on track to meet Paris. Governments have agreed national determined contributions to climate change, which if you add them all up, are not anywhere near 2 degrees C. Still, we believe that society will put so much pressure on politicians that it will happen, that indeed the curve will bend, and that maybe in 5 or 10 years' time we will be on that trajectory downward. But it will be difficult to achieve that, partly simply because there is a lot of inertia in society, there's a lot of inertia in the energy system. $55 trillion of investment will have to be in a way rewired to create that downward trend. And just in case, for those of you who will take news also of statistics in the Netherlands, also in the Netherlands, where we think we are ahead of things, carbon emissions last year grew. And that is not because of us, that is because of the choice that all consumers in the Netherlands made. Yeah. So it will be a real challenge to make this happen. We believe it can be done, and we believe we will play a role in it. We actually will play a role in it to make it happen. But at the same time, we also believe that a sense of realism is important to be a responsible player. Honesty is one of our core values. That also means intellectual honesty, not misleading people with all sorts of stories that are basically not true, cannot be delivered on. Indeed, we believe that by 2050, there will still be a significant amount of oil and gas in the energy mix, simply because it is impossible to do otherwise. Which, by the way, doesn't mean that we can't meet Paris. Even by 2070, when we are at the so-called net zero emission of the energy system, there will still be oil and gas in the mix. And this is simply because there are a number of energy use applications that will be very hard to replace by, for instance, renewables. A lot of people mistake energy and electricity. A lot of people think as long as we have enough solar panels and wind power, we can be without fossil fuel. Well, imagine if we did all of this in one go in the Netherlands. We had 100% renewable electricity provision. Then we would have taken care of 17% of energy consumption. The other 83% would still be oil and gas, and yes, indeed, coal, because we just built a number of coal-fired power generation stations in this country. So we think all of this needs to change. It needs to be bent around, but it will take time to make it happen. We are in favor of working on that transition. We are in favor of policies that make these things happen, like putting a meaningful price on carbon, and we are ready to invest in those parts of the energy system that are needed to bring this transition about. So yes, indeed, I'm perfectly okay to say oil and gas will continue to play a role. And I hope it will continue to play a role, because otherwise, life as we know it will not be the life that we are facing in the future. But I also firmly believe that Paris is achievable, it will be difficult, and that we will play a role in achieving it. Thank you very much.
Number one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kees Kodder. I work for Greenpeace. Greenpeace works together worldwide with indigenous people. We have here 3 people who have crossed the Atlantic Ocean from Argentina. They would like to ask you questions about the situation in Patagonia. They will ask their questions in Spanish. We have a certified translator who will translate their questions into English. And I would like to suggest that you treat with them as one block. Is that okay?
That would be fine. If you could, yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you.
Mari Compuche, tu facci mlelo facciante, tu facci ruka.
I will start greeting you in my native language. Madi Compuche, mululu tu facci ruka facciante. ¿Tú me vas a decir en castellano?
Sí. Buenos días a todos quienes se encuentran presentes en esta casa. Mi nombre es Gilberto Wilipán y soy autoridad política de mi pueblo. Mi rol es huerquén, vocero, transmisor del pensamiento mapuche hacia la sociedad no mapuche y viceversa.
My greeting translated into English was, good day to all of you who are here together in this house today. My name is Gilberto Wilipán. I am a political authority of the Mapuche indigenous people in Argentina. My function is called huerquén, and I am like a spokesperson who makes possible the communication with my people from the non-Mapuche people and the other way around.
Vengo de una organización política mapuche cuyo nombre es Confederación Mapuche del Neuquén, y estamos representando a las comunidades mapuches que hoy están siendo afectadas por la explotación petrolera allí en Patagonia Norte, sobre lo que hoy llaman, como producto de su emprendimiento extractivista, vaca muerta.
My political organization represents the Mapuche, different Mapuche populations who are victim of the exploitation project known as Vaca Muerta.
Nada más decir de que desde la llegada del extractivismo a nuestros territorios comunitarios comienza la tristeza, la incertidumbre y la muerte de nuestros hermanos a temprana edad.
I would like to explain that since oil and gas have been extracted in our land, we have seen sadness, we have seen sickness, and we have seen death at an untimely age among our family members, our brothers and sisters.
La explotación del petróleo y gas convencionales ya provocó y sigue provocando un terrible impacto en nuestra forma de vida comunitaria. La expulsión de nuestros hermanos de sus territorios ancestrales, destrucción de nuestros territorios, contaminación de las aguas, de ríos, lagos y vertientes naturales, con la presencia de metales pesados, producto de los derrames y emisiones. También contamina el aire que respiramos.
The exploitation of conventional oil and gas has affected deeply our communities. Our brothers and sisters have been chased from their lands. Our waters, the air that we breathe, and our rivers and lakes have been polluted with heavy metals as a result from the leaks and emissions of the oil industry. Our air is polluted, is polluted by the oil industry. It enters our body and our lungs, and our people are getting different cancers.
Todos estos metales pesados entran al cuerpo, dañando específicamente los pulmones de las personas, quienes van sufriendo diferentes tipos de cáncer, y desde el boom de vaca muerta, con la aplicación del fracking, esto se va acrecentando. Las violaciones de nuestros derechos se están agrandando y Shell es cómplice de eso con conocimiento del caso. Queremos preguntarles.
And what I just told you was already during the conventional extraction. Now, with the fracking boom in Vaca Muerta, it has all become worse. And we think that Shell is knowingly complicit in this. And we would like to ask you the following.
¿Están dispuestos a asumir un compromiso concreto, serio y por escrito sobre el cumplimiento de manera irrestricta sobre los derechos humanos de los pueblos indígenas, específicamente el derecho de las comunidades afectadas por su actividad, la consulta previa, libre e informada que se encuentra contenido en el derecho nacional e internacional?
Are you willing to assume a serious and written commitment that you will comply in an unrestricted manner with the human rights of the indigenous peoples, especially the rights of communities that are affected by your activities, to our right to FPIC, free, prior and informed consultation, which is a right enshrined in national and international law, binding for both Argentina as a state and for Shell?
¿Y que obliga tanto al Estado argentino como a Shell a cumplirla?
And which is binding both for Argentina as a national state as well as for Shell.
Bien, para continuar, mi nombre es Emanuel Guagliardo. También vengo de Argentina, de la provincia de Neuquén, el corazón de Vaca Muerta, y venimos desde allí a contarles que en nuestro país el ex CEO de la compañía en Argentina, Juan José Aranguren, fue nombrado ministro de Energía del actual gobierno de Mauricio Macri y asumió el cargo sin antes desprenderse de su participación accionaria en la compañía, con lo cual se ha construido un escándalo de corrupción política a raíz de su asunción que tiene, entre otras cosas, causas judiciales en marcha en nuestro país. En este marco, preguntarles, ¿ustedes consideran que Shell se está involucrando en un conflicto de corrupción política en nuestro país?
Hello, my name is Emanuel Gallardo, and I would like to ask you the following. The ex-CEO of Shell, Juan José Aranguren, who is now Minister of Energy of Argentina, took up that position in the government of President Mauricio Macri without discarding his shares in Shell. Do you not think that in this way Shell is getting involved in a very serious problem of political corruption, because the fact that he took up his position as a minister without selling his shares before is being seen as a serious, one of the most serious problems of corruption in the government of Mauricio Macri?
Y Y en segundo lugar, quisiéramos manifestar ante esta asamblea que a partir de la asunción de Juan José Aranguren como ministro de Energía, Shell ha aumentado notablemente su participación en Vaca Muerta y actualmente ha obtenido una estratégica participación en 2 yacimientos en los cuales participa en un 50% con la petrolera estatal YPF, y ello ha conducido a que Shell Argentina informe sobre un aumento y una multiplicación por 10 veces de sus actuales inversiones en la Argentina. Frente a eso, preguntarles, ¿cuándo piensan invertir en energías renovables, por ejemplo, el potencial eólico y solar de nuestra Patagonia, antes de seguir invirtiendo en la industria no convencional cuyos daños ambientales y sociales son muy severos? Muchas gracias.
Thanks to this privilege of having Aranguren as a minister, Shell has been able to increase tremendously its participation in the Vaca Muerta fields. They will be able to multiply 10 times their investment in non-conventional oil and gas extraction. My question is, when will Shell start to invest also in renewables in our region, above all considering that Patagonia has an enormous potential for both wind and solar energy? Thank you very much.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Fernando Cabrera, también vengo de Argentina. Integro una organización llamada el Observatorio Petrolero Sur, que desde hace 10 años discute la política hidrocarburífera en ese país.
Good afternoon, good morning. My name is Fernando Cabrera. I am also from Argentina. I am from an organization called Observatorio Petrolero Sur, which since 10 years has had a critical position towards the Argentinian hydrocarbon policies.
En Argentina, Shell está realizando fracking en la Norpatagonia, en las inmediaciones de importantes fuentes de agua como ríos y lagos que dan agua a más de 500.000 de personas. Fractura también en inmediaciones de zonas de histórica producción frutícola.
In Argentina, Shell is doing fracking operations now in the region of the northern Patagonia, very close to rivers and lakes, which provides clean water to more than 500,000 of inhabitants, and also very close to historical regions where fruit and vegetables are being planted and harvested.
Según se difundió, la compañía pretende multiplicar las perforaciones en esa región. Quería preguntarles entonces cómo concilian el objetivo de aumentar la producción con la destrucción de nuestros territorios y nuestra agua. Gracias.
And as we understood, Shell wants to multiply its drilling in our region. And my question is the following. How is Shell able to match, on one hand, their goals of increasing production, and on the other hand, the tremendous destruction of land and water in our country? Thank you very much.
Thank you for making the long trip to be here at our meeting. We appreciate you expressing your views and being so organized in the way you do it. Ben, could you respond to those 4 questions, please?
Thank you very much indeed, also from my side, for the effort you took to travel. Mr. Huilipan, I understand that your challenges are actually twofold. First of all, environmental concerns. Secondly, the rights of indigenous people in Argentina. I also know that you have been visiting our office last week, where we've had a discussion with you to exchange views. And as a matter of fact, of course, we have been working with the Upachu community for many years since we have been active in the Vaca Muerta. We like to believe that we are a company that has constructive engagements with those communities in which neighborhood we operate. And we very much like to indeed operate on a principle of consent, but also on the principle of agreements with indigenous communities who could be affected by our operations. And I believe our long history of engagement is indeed testament to that. We have, of course, subsequently, based on some allegations that we have heard around environmental degradation, again checked back with our operations in Argentina, where the reaction was that we do not recognize some of the allegations being made, also not the allegations that are being made here. But rest assured, we will continue to look into this to understand whether there are any practices, any operations that can be attributed to us that do indeed have a negative effect on the environment, because clearly we do not want to have that to happen. In terms of your concerns around indigenous rights and human rights, I can assure you that we subscribe to and support and comply with every regulation that is on the record when it comes to human rights. But when it comes to some of the discussions and disputes that may exist between your community as well as the provincial government of Neuquén or Argentina, obviously we have no role to play. Although we do, I hope you will recognize, convene a forum to make sure that dialogue on your rights can actually take place. And we will continue to do so. We will continue to play a constructive role. We want to be seen as a welcome neighbor. But when it comes to the also the third point raised by Mr. Cabrera on the effects of hydraulic fracturing, which indeed is an operation that takes place in the Vaca Muerta, it is in our mind very clear that these activities can be done responsibly. We have a number of very clear principles to do with hydraulic fracturing that protect groundwater, that protect all sorts of other environmental aspects. And of course, you have to bear in mind that even though things may take place close to a river or groundwater, the activities, of course, are kilometers deep underground, whereas groundwater typically is in the sort of tens to hundreds.